Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dumplins and Dancing. Truly one of my favorite times of year here at the settlement school, and I am so excited to start off this wonderful event with two of my absolute favorites, talking about the sweetness, the great sweetness sorghum. So, folks, we're going to bring in the great Chef Weta Michael and Miss Ronnie Lundy into our live stream, and we'll get started right now. Hey guys,
Hi.
I sure wish we were there.
I do too. I can smell the food in the kitchen right now, and oh my goodness, I remember Ronnie pulling us out of the fire, one of my first or second dumplings, and making a cabbage casserole that was absolutely to die for. Maybe we'll have her back to talk about that one day. But folks, welcome to Dumplins and Dancing. Unfortunately, it is a virtual event due to the craziness of this world, but we're going to have a great week, starting out with sorghum. Tomorrow we've got country ham, and even this year we have a class on spirits. So tune in every night this week at 7:00 as we dance a little, we sing a little, and we talk about some really tremendous food. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to tonight's presenters, and they're going to talk to you all about some wonderful sorghum.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Jason. And I'm trying to get, there we go. I was trying to get myself situated here. You know, everything is backwards. So Weta, did Jason just say that instead of hiding and drinking, they're going to actually talk about spirits this year?
I know. I was like, gosh, there's some benefits to virtual after all. You can.
I know. We should have sorghum cocktails.
I know.
Well, listen, we're just going to have some good recipes and demonstration, and I want to get to that, but just in case there are some folks here who are not absolutely all that familiar with sorghum syrup, which is what we're going to be talking about, I'm going to start out and give a little bit of history. And oh, look at you, Kitty. Yes, you can buy that book. It would be wonderful. Weta Michael is in it. She's recipes from Weta and Edward Lee, and John Fleer, and now I'm forgetting everybody else. And
it's a great book. It's a wonderful book. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much. If it is, it's because you're in it, buddy.
Oh,
but I want to share a little bit of both the history and the definition of sorghum syrup, because there's a lot of confusion about it. So to start at the very beginning, sorghum is an ancient grain, and we think it may have probably come from Africa, although there's some indication it may have been from India or China. It certainly shows up as a grain used for both food for people and food for animals in all of those cultures very, very early on. And the grain comes to the United States, as many of our distinctive foods did, with the African slave ships, and enslaved people brought sorghum and the knowledge of how to raise the grain. But we're not talking about the uses of the grain. This is where it starts to get really good and confusing. What happens is that there are certain strains of this plant, and you've seen the plant everywhere. You've probably looked out your window and thought, oh, that corn doesn't have any cobs on it, because it looks like that's basically what it looks like, a stalk of corn with no cobs growing on it. And it grows all across the United States. The grain is a commercial crop because it's primarily used now for feeding livestock. But somewhere in the mid-1850s, somebody realized that a couple of strains of the sorghum plant, the cane itself held a sweet juice in it, very much like sugar cane. And we have there's no indication that those earlier cultures that used sorghum as a grain, a very important grain, used it as a juice or as a syrup. But about 1850, horticulturists and scientists in France and England started messing around with the syrup, trying to boil it down and process it to make sugar. Because it so resembled sugar cane, they were sure that they would be able to do this. And everybody wanted to break the sugar cartel, which was located in the Caribbean and in the deep South, Louisiana, Mississippi, that coastal area down there. There were a few corporations that were controlling the processing of sugar. And it was also an industry that was deeply dependent on slavery. The people who grew and harvested and worked to process sugar were enslaved people. So when they started discovering that this other plant, which was a temperate weather plant, in other words, the sugar cane, actual sugar cane, had to be grown in that deep South region, in the areas, the Caribbean and the deep South where there was slavery. But they discovered that this plant could grow all the way into as far as southern Canada. And they decided if they could make sugar from this, that they would be able to break the sugar cartel. And it also became a plant that abolitionists had this very strong hope that they would be able to break that link in the chain of slavery. So in about 1850, they start importing this seeds for this cane into the United States. It comes in through Massachusetts and it comes in through Charleston, South Carolina. And people start planting it and squeezing it. Maybe you all have seen the old way they would do that with a mule going around and around, and the cane is being pressed down and the juice runs out, and then you cook that down. But when you're doing sugar cane, what happens when you get that juice out is that you both cook it and you also spin it through a centrifugal force machine. You can hear the high-tech lingo here. Whatever a centrifugal force machine is, and that makes crystals come out of that liquid. And those crystals are sugar. And what is left behind is, well, the first boil off you can get cane syrup from without spinning out the sugar. Oh, Rita, I lost you. I don't know how I did that. Anyway, you can also, okay, I'm just going to keep talking here. Rita, I don't know where you went on my screen. I hope everyone else can see you. Anyway, after the sugar is spun out, you can continue to boil that syrup, and you get molasses from that, and you get a first flavor of molasses that's kind of rich and not bitter, but the more you boil it, the bitterer it gets, until you get around to having blackstrap molasses, which is really not a happy thing. And do not mistake, in any of the recipes we give you, do not mistake sorghum syrup for blackstrap molasses. That will make you very unhappy. Okay, so what happens with sorghum, however, what happens with sorghum is that when you boil it down and you try to put it through that centrifugal process, it doesn't make nice crystals the way that sugar does. Sometimes it makes crystals. Most of the time they're very irregular and not uniformly flavored. And most of the time it doesn't make a crystal at all. It just stays a syrup. And so it was not usable as a substitute for sugar. But during the Civil War, it became prized as a sweetener because nobody was able to get sugar in the North or throughout much of the South, because part of the Union Army's tactic was to break that cartel and burn down sugar and released those plantations from slavery. And that continued for a while after the war, but not too long after that, growers in the Midwest and farther north discovered that certain beets could make a really, really good sugar, and they were able to make beet sugar in temperate states. So sorghum syrup suddenly really was not, it wasn't considered to be a substitute for sugar. But what happened, um, yes, David, I'll get to that in a second. But what happened is that there were people, particularly in the Appalachian Mountains, and also farmers in the Midwest, that loved, not only did they love the taste of sorghum syrup, which we'll talk about here in a minute, but they also loved the fact that it provided them with independence. So one of the things that I like to say, given that the sorghum syrup was brought here and processed initially in opposition to slavery, and then it was kept by independent farmers and people who did not want to be beholden to somebody else, I like to say that sorghum syrup has the flavor of sweetness. So people continue, particularly in the mountain south, people continue to grow their cane and to process their cane. There would usually be one person in the community who had the press and the pans to cook the sorghum. And so there would be a stir off that would be a community event, and everybody would bring their cane and they would put it in together. And so Jay Pierce, who's another chef who loves sorghum syrup, told me once that he thinks sorghum tastes like community because everybody put theirs in together, and what came out was the process of the entire community. That was what you were getting in your mouth with the flavor. Now, for people who, and then I think all this won't confusing enough about the sorghum that's a cane and the sorghum that's not, and all that confusion. There's also confusion about what it's called. It was called sorghum molasses, or some people just called it molasses or lasses. And there were also people in the mountains who will swear to you today that their grandparents or great grandparents grew sugar cane and boiled it down. But in fact, if you are out of the deep south, you are not growing sugar cane. The climate and the temperature doesn't allow it. You are growing sorghum cane, but people called it sugar cane because they used it for that same purpose. And it has a taste unlike any other sweetener that I know of. The closest thing in flavor to it is that I know of is Indian jaggery. But Indian jaggery is a sugar and sorghum syrup is a syrup. So it has a more flexible means of use. Wita, you tell us what you think about the flavor of it and how you came to use it. And also while you're in there, tell us the story of what I like to call Wita's conversion on the road to Damascus. When Lucy Breathitt, the angel Lucy Breathitt appeared and converted you into a sorghum syrup apostle.
Oh, that's a good story. The thing about sorghum that's so great is it's not a one-dimensional sweetener, and you can taste the dimension of sorghum if you taste across sweeteners. So if you taste white sugar, brown sugar, maple syrup, sorghum, honey, local honey, and you taste across, you'll notice a grassiness. Now, some honeys have grassiness, but you'll notice a deep grassiness and herbaceous quality to sorghum and a minerality to it that I think is really, really, it can be very pronounced depending on where the sorghum cane grew. And that's one of the things I like about sorghum is that it's like honey and that the bees are pollinating and gathering their little nectar in certain areas. And so that really informs the taste of their honey. But if the same thing is true of sorghum, in a way that it's not true for other syrups, like blackstrap molasses, or they can be a dominating sweetness, and a dark licorice flavor. But, well, I didn't know much about sorghum. Ronnie, we had a fantastic night. Do you remember when you came and you were writing the book and we had that great dinner at Valley Hill? I miss you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was great. And I mean, I started actually drinking a lot of bourbon with sorghum since we're talking about spirits.
Me too. Do you think the did that?
One of the best. So at Woodford, I've retired from Woodford Reserve, but I was the chef in residence there at the distillery for more than 10 years. And so our job was to figure out what paired well with bourbon. And really what you're pairing with bourbon is for the finish. And so everything that you work with needs to have a great finish that accentuates the strengths of a finish there that's in the spirit. And so sorghum, for those of you who haven't tried this, pour a little spoonful of sorghum out, get your favorite bourbon, doesn't have to be Woodford, could be any kind, and put the spoon upside down on your tongue. I would do it for you right now if I had any bourbon. I didn't prepared.
And let me go get some and pass it through.
Yes, please. Next time I see you, and then sip then taste the bourbon, and then the bourbon pulls the sorghum pulls the finish way out. The finish can last. I've timed it up to 18 minutes. It's really a great.
Whoa!
It's great, and I always tell people a great Christmas present is a bag of sorghum suckers and a bottle of
bourbon. That is a great present.
Yeah, it's really a nice pair.
Start selling that. Can we do that? Can we ship bourbon?
Yeah, ship bourbon with sorghum sucker. But the fun, and we did. Woodford does all these very high-end juleps from Derby that cost $1,000 in a cup and all that stuff. So one year we did a sorghum julep, which I want to encourage people to try to make a sorghum syrup for a cocktail. It's just equal parts and hot water. Just like you're making a simple syrup out of sugar and water, you do the same thing with your sorghum, and then crushed ice.
There's a recipe for that in that book we saw earlier.
Yes, in this book right here. but it's a great, I know you said to talk about the flavor, but I love it, especially because for some of the history that you were talking about is so interesting to me, because one of the things that I think is great about sorghum is the farmer grows it and boils it down all one. Like Randall Rock does a lot of the sorghum that we buy here in country sorghum. Well, he grows his sorghum. He has different paddocks that grow different kinds, or not kinds, but he feels like he gets different sorghum from different areas of the farm.
Right.
And he boils it all, he bottles it all, and he sells it all. So he gets the whole markup. So I've always loved that. And to me, that was interesting to hear you talk about how they decided to make sorghum to break that sugar cartel, empowering the independent grower and farmer and probably sharecropper who was coming out of slavery in order to find an income stream for the farm. Just the whole thing, I can see it and feel it in.
The contemporary part of that is that when tobacco suddenly stopped being the cash crop for so many farmers in central Kentucky and east and central Tennessee and North Carolina, a lot of those folks turned to sorghum, went back to sorghum, or expanded their families' sorghum making process as a means to finding some cash flow for that. So it continues to be this thing that allows small family farmers to make some money and continue farming the rest of their land. And so many of the people, when you're saying that, I'm thinking of the Olin Hughes family. Terry Hughes down in Young Harris, Georgia, makes the beautiful sorghum. That's the whole family business. Danny Townsend.
Yeah, Danny Townsend is a hero of Kentucky sorghum.
Yeah. Well, and Kentucky is just, Kentucky is just crawling with good sorghum syrup. And you bring up one of the things that I found so interesting. I always meant to take a picture, and I never did. When I was writing Sorghum Savor, I always had at least 6 different jars of sorghum syrup going at any time, and they all had different flavors. I mean, it's kind of like being a wine
Yeah.
obsessive that we really are talking about terroir,
Mhm.
as well as talking about the process. I mean, different people cook theirs a little bit longer. The Harrells up here in Bakersville, Doug Harrell, told me that he cooks his syrup a little darker than is kind of the norm right now, because that's what people in upper Western North Carolina want. And um,
I'm looking at all these comments on my bourbon need for bourbon. Sorry.
Jenny Williams, if you get in your car right now and drive with us some bourbon, run it down.
Jenny, I'm sorry. Shit.
This girl is
I
oh my God.
need some because tomorrow's election day.
All right, and now listen to this.
Right now.
David Neville says Rebecca Ruth should try sorghum and chocolate bourbon balls.
Oh, that would be good.
Oh my gosh, I hadn't even thought of that. I wonder, okay, will you think about how that has to work consistency-wise, and let's get that going.
One thing about sorghum, though, is that it doesn't ever stay in a crystal, right?
Yeah.
It goes back to syrup. So it'd be hard to, like, you can't get a hard crack out of it.
Right.
I talk about the caramel demo. It's always going to go back. I know this because, well, I knew this, but Chris Morris, who was the master distiller for Woodford, when he was making those sorghum julep for the millionaire's julep or whatever, he decided, well, I'll have them take the sorghum to a powder. So they reduced tons of sorghum. Well, they go back in there to make all the kits for all the sorghum juleps, and it all went back to sorghum.
Oh wow. Yeah. It is a really, sorghum just wants to be a syrup. You know,
Yeah.
it's like a Buddhist thing. That is its natural state, and it reverts to it.
Right. There's a scientific name for that, Roddy. I can't think of what it is, but
it's not Zen.
Who knows?
David Neville said earlier on here that he calls it sorghum molasses, and almost everybody does. Just know that when you go in the store and you see something that says molasses, that's not what we're talking about. Now, if you're going in your local produce stand or an Amish store and it says sorghum molasses, then that probably is what we're talking about, right?
All sorghum is molasses, but not all molasses is sorghum.
Exactly. And there's a philosophical name for that. No.
Yeah.
The sorghum paradox. You know? Along with bourbon, the other thing that I love sorghum with is ginger. And I'm thinking about that because I saw my old college roommate, Kathleen Carpenter, on here, and we were like obsessive gingerbread makers. I think we made Jiffy, the Jiffy box, because it was like a nickel at the store or whatever. But I made a gingerbread not long ago that I was just sort of going, oh, I don't have this, and yes, I do have this. And it was based on Karen Barker's recipe, and so it had strong black coffee, a little bit of cocoa, usual gingerbread, and this fantastic sorghum syrup in it. And I mean, it was divine. It was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
I always make gingerbread with sorghum. Those big soft gingerbread squares. We make a gingerbread cookie too, a ginger gem we call it. That has the country rock in it. But don't you love that soft, hot gingerbread? It's like
I'm talking about. Oh yeah. And I mean, it really is. It almost exists to convey sorghum syrup to your mouth. You know. So here's another thing about cooking with it. And then Jenny Williams wants to know if we can get a Venn diagram of this. Yes, we'll have a round Ronnie and a round Weta and all the places that sorghum connects. We're going to get on this. um, so one of the things that I love about it is that it is so versatile. I'm talking a book about how it goes with so much of Indian food. I mean, it makes the best masala sweetener. You'll never go back to honey once you do that. Putting it in your curries, etc., just gives it a flavor. It's incredible with tamari, soy sauce, and some kind of sharp vinegar in any kind of Japanese or Oriental food. And then Wita, you were talking to me on the phone about Ethiopian food.
Well, I had a technique that I demonstrate later. You can look at it, and it's clarifying butter with sorghum, because what you were just talking about for like Indian curries and then some African curries. But now you told me it's unlikely they ever used sorghum, but in Ethiopian cooking and in Indian cooking,
we don't know,
We don't know, right? They often clarify their butter because they use ghee. They use a lot of butter, and they clarify their butter. They don't just clarify it like the French do or like we do here, where we're taking off butter solid from butter fat to saute with or something like that. They actually, you melt the butter, and you might melt the butter with almost 2 cups of onions and turmeric root and cumin and mustard seed and
wow,
fresh red. It's really amazing, especially if you're doing watts and stuff like that. So you clarify your butter with all this stuff, and it tastes incredible. Well, in the process of learning about that, and I really wish I could remember the provenance. We decided to clarify butter with sorghum. And I want to say it was because we were reading about African cuisine and thinking about the relationship between Kentucky's cuisine and ingredients and native African cuisine and its ingredients, just in the way that other people are doing all across the South right now, and the way that we think about our African American heritage and our food culture, all of that stuff. So in thinking about that, we decided to clarify butter with sorghum. And there's a part of me that thinks that it may have come from a French cookbook too. So it's a 1/4 cup of sorghum to a pound of butter. You melt them together and then clarify the two together. And you'll see in the demo, the top comes right off. The sorghum comes right off, and you can use that still in baking or anything else. It kind of crystallizes the butter. The butter solids fall to the bottom, and then you end up with this clear butter, but it doesn't have much sugar in it at all. It has a little bit, but it's like the nutty taste of sorghum in this butter. And then we use that to saute veal sweetbreads, but you could use it for pork chops or chicken, or you could cook hoe cakes or cornbread in it.
Oh my God, I've got some pork chops in here right now.
It'll
gotta go.
But like what you were saying with like doing, if you were to take sorghum, and I didn't do this today because I just wanted to keep the technique simple, but if you were doing Edward loves lime and chili and sorghum together. That's one of his recipes in your book, I think. It's like a lime chili sorghum glaze.
We're talking about Edward Lee, right?
Yes. So you could clarify sorghum and chili and lime zest and all that stuff in your butter. It would be really good. It would be really, really good. And then I'm thinking, as you said that with all your Indian cooking, yes, I haven't done that, but that's I'm going to use that ghee that I made today from the from doing that process for the video. I'm going to use that in my next curry chicken.
Mm-hmm. I think that would be wonderful. Or even just, if you were going to brown cauliflower and potatoes and etc. with a little bit of cumin and this sounds so good.
Oh yeah, that's great. That really does sound great.
Yes. So I didn't ask Jason, are we showing? We're going to show your process.
Yes, yeah. When we're done talking, I mean, he said just talk as long as we want to. I don't know if he knows what he's saying in regard to that. We have Ronnie and I, by the way, we have no idea how long this is supposed to last.
I think it's supposed to be an hour, but I love that he said just keep talking.
Yeah, the videos will run after the conversation.
Okay, so it's not.
Please don't expect
So let's talk for a minute about what the videos are. There's the butter clarification. Then you're doing a vinaigrette. Is that
Yeah, I
correct?
did the sorghum vinaigrette, which is one of my signature things that we make in all the restaurants, which is based on a Liberty Hall recipe from Frankfurt, where they were using maple syrup, and I just substituted sorghum, and it does have bourbon in it, like uncooked out bourbon, which you'll see in the. But it makes a really nice, light, tangy dressing, which I always feel like sometimes vinaigrettes are too cloying. The typical ratio is 3-to-1 oil to vinegar. This is a 1-to-1, so it's 1 cup of malt vinegar, the sorghum, some aromatics, and then 1 cup of salad oil, which is lower in calories but also higher in flavor. Do you ever feel that way, that sometimes vinaigrettes have too much oil in them?
Yeah, I do.
So,
Exactly. And I tend, when I'm doing it, vinaigrette is one of those things that I rarely ever go to. It's just like I grab what's there and
no, I don't think about a recipe either.
kind of.
And listen, I have an idea based on that soy sauce thing you said. One of the recipes that I have made in the past, and I just started thinking about this because I used to do a soy caramel, and you would use regular sugar, bring it to almost a caramel, bring it to a softball stage caramel color, and then you pour soy sauce in it, and then you could pour that over like whole salmon. I learned this from Eileen McCormick. You could pour that over, and then it kind of creates a soy caramel hard crack in a way for especially for salmon. It's really great, and I think that it would work great with sorghum, because I was just realizing that I make the caramel sauce from your book on the demo. So you bring the sorghum to a boil, and then you mount in cold butter. But you could bring your sorghum to a boil, and you could easily add in, like if you brought a cup of sorghum to a boil or half a cup of sorghum to a boil, I would maybe start with a quarter portion of soy sauce, see how that goes, and then you could add more. That might create sort of this really cool sorghum soy caramel that would be really good on pork roast, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. There is a recipe in Sorghum Savor, I'm pretty sure, for salmon with a soy and
sorghum glaze,
kind of glaze. But what you're talking about sounds to me sturdier and the kind of thing that would be fantastic on a roast, or even. I wonder if you put some citrus in that. Yeah.
And ginger.
Yeah, and ginger, of course. And did we say bourbon? Have we said bourbon?
Bourbon.
Oh my goodness, we'll look back on this. Our children will swear we were drinking bourbon while we were talking.
No, 1 glass of water. That's it.
Me too.
Well, I see there's Julia Rainey Ludwig said the Black Cock family for generations in Ohio. She was talking about seeing them crushing the cane, and she has 2 quarts of that, and needs a recipe for sorghum hot toddy. Winter is coming.
Oh,
what's hot toddy? Lemon, water, bourbon.
Yeah.
I
think, and I think you would just you would make that warm. I'm remembering, I know Julie, and she was the person who actually started me putting a lump of crystallized ginger in a cup of tea. And instead of kind of stirring that around, and drink it, and then you eat the ginger when you come down to it. So now I'm trying to think if we could get some crystallized ginger in this toddy too.
Exactly. I was doing crystallized ginger, sorghum, water, bourbon, and lemon.
Okay, that's the Julie Ranny toddy. Okay, I love the way that comes out. Oh my gosh, which brings us to Wita and I got into this whole conversation about the naming of recipes and how the Great British Baking Show has taught us that the Brits are the most brilliant recipe namers in the universe, because they just make something, and if it fails, they give it a name and it becomes like a classic, right? Like, what on earth is an eaten mess, for crying out loud, right?
Well, and I feel like I kind of wonder that, a lot, that's a very diverse show. They have all kinds of Brits on there, whose family's from India or something like that. And I'm like, how do they know what an eaten mess is? Like, how long does it take to learn? Crazy. Like, what kind of baking culture do those people have over there? It's like,
And if they know all that, why doesn't the rest of the world know about Woodford pudding? Take it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so we could pose the Woodford pudding challenge. I actually, every time they have that pudding challenge on there, I always say, "What about the Woodford pudding?" Well, I don't know.
To write Paul and Prue, tell them.
Yeah, they would think it was too sweet, maybe. I don't know. Well, I didn't get a chance to make it today because I thought I had blackberry preserves and I didn't. So I know you've said for the Woodford pudding, but I made the caramel sauce. But I went to make the pudding and I didn't have my blackberry preserves. But the nice thing about Woodford pudding is it's just a quick and easy jam cake.
Absolutely. Jam cake in a pan,
Yeah, jam cake in a pan. Whip that sorghum caramel on there and you're in business.
No, what do we call this in Britain? We'll call it a jam spoonie. Yeah. Spoon it up and eat it. Oh my, it's so good. It's funny. Yeah.
Well, we need Hyman dessert.
Well, I kind of think that Woodford pudding, since we're talking about I've been thinking about this today, and I think that it probably is through the British line coming through the Appalachians and into central Kentucky. Woodford, in case there's anybody not from or around Kentucky on here, Woodford County is just outside of Lexington. It is where Versailles is located. the curiously named Versailles. And Midway is in Woodford.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Which is
where I am.
Where Rita has the Holly Hill Inn and the Midway Bakery. Is that what it's called? The Midway Bakery? Where
Bakery. Yeah.
Incredible molasses cookie that will just blow you away. And so Woodford pudding has been made for generations by people from Woodford, Kentucky. But the first time I heard of it was when I was researching Chuck Beans back in 1990. And I found it in one of those community cookbooks somewhere. And I was just like, wow, why haven't I known about this forever? Because it's the kind of thing that you can go, oh, I didn't make the dessert. And you can walk into your kitchen and whip it up and, people think you're a genius.
Yeah, it's a 1, 2, 3 cake for sure. It's the thing that we were laughing about. You said, "Oh, you've probably been making that for generations." I'm like, I probably got it from your book.
And then we're trying to figure out whose recipe was. Because
the person who begged me to make it was Lucy Breathitt. That's the interesting. Yeah. That's how Lucy. I think we started telling her story back when you were writing that book, Lucy. And I think you got to go to the fabled sorghum house, or did you? Were you able to? I'm not sure.
No, I was not able to. I think that she had the sorghum. She would stop making it by the time we talked. Will you tell old Lucy Breathitt's story? Is just such a great.
Well, we should know. You should know. Everyone should know. So Lucy Breathitt's family, her cousin is Libby Jones, whose husband Brereton Jones was the governor of Kentucky, and Lucy and Libby, their fathers were of course brothers, and they were part of the Alexander family who started Woodburn Farm, which had hosted the very first horse sale in central Kentucky and sold the first thoroughbred in Kentucky ever sold. And so she comes from this line of very storied family, and her farm and her farm yes and her farm is across the street from Libby's farm, and Libby and her family focused on thoroughbreds, and Lucy and her side of the farm focused more on cattle and tobacco. And so she was a big part of this agricultural diversification program and became a good friend of mine when I first opened Holly Hill Inn. And I haven't seen her in a while, so I'm hoping she's safe at home. Yeah. But she had this beautiful, her daughter is in the horse business. And so Lucy had this amazing barn built, or her daughter had this amazing horse barn built. And Lucy went over and sweet talked the contractor into coming and building her a sorghum house. And it was all clad stainless steel sorghum chutes that run in these various directions to cool the sorghum perfectly.
Aristocrat sorghum.
And unfortunately, I don't think it's used at all now. Although she does grow a lot of sorghum on the farm, it's not something that she's making anymore.
Yeah.
But she drive her riding lawnmower instead of a mule. She'd drive her little riding lawnmower round and round the wheel to grind the sorghum juice in.
Oh my gosh, I love that. You know what that reminds me of is that Sturgill Simpson has just put out an album that's available on YouTube. It's not, you can't even get the CD yet, but he didn't want to wait. And it's called Cutting Grass, I think. And it's his music done to bluegrass with people like Stuart Duncan and I'll think of her name in just a minute, the brilliant young woman mandolin player. But anyway, the cover of it is Sturgill riding lawnmower. So, I mean, Sturgill, you know, is owned by Breathitt County. So maybe we can talk Sturgill into going to Lucy's and he can ride. And we can sell the limited edition Sturgill Simpson sorghum syrup. Will somebody please call Sturge and let him know? I just think this is amazing.
I love Sturgill Simpson so dearly.
Oh, God, me too. Me too.
I've listened to that album actually. I don't know the name of the young lady you're talking about, but
Sierra Hall. I knew
Sierra Hall.
Yeah, Sierra
Hall. Yeah.
Stuart Duncan is the fiddler on it, and he's incredible and amazing. Married to a Kentucky girl, by the way. Anyway, yeah, I think that's what we need to do is get Sturgill involved in this. And when you think about it, Weta, doesn't Sturgill's voice kind of sound like sorghum syrup?
Yeah, it is.
No, really,
there's a lot about Sturgill that I think like sorghum.
To it, as my mother would have said. All right, we're going to write the Sturgill Simpson cookbook.
Woo! I see Jonathan Piercy has said, dirty Victorian slang or dessert made of the Great British baking soda. Oh my goodness.
Okay, Rossi is a dessert because I saw that one, right?
I love wobbly tart.
Wobbly tart. I know her. All right. That will be the 10-point quiz after we're done. Thanks, Jacob. That's a joke. They'll get it. Oh dear. So one of the things that people ask me often is, how can I get sorghum syrup? Where can I get sorghum syrup? And if you live in our neck of the woods, anywhere from where Weta is up in Woodford, down through the mountains, through East Tennessee, over into where I am in Western North Carolina, and on down the Appalachians into North Georgia, just go drive down your highway in the fall and you will see it being sold somewhere. Oh, and Southern Indiana too. I give the Hoosiers credit where they need to get credit. And there are places in the Midwest as well, and some folks in Oklahoma and Texas. But there's an organization called their initials are the NASSPP, and they are the National Association of Sweet Sorghum Producers and something else that begins with a P that I can't think of right now. Not perpetrators. Who knows? But anyway, they have an online website. If you got that much in there, National Association of Sweet Sorghum Producers, their website will show up. And they used to keep a list of people who were making actual sorghum syrup. The other place that you can find it really often is in those Amish groceries that are now scattered all across the country. Boy, have they ever figured out how to market, and do they have some wonderful stuff there. So you can often find sorghum syrup there as well. And you can find it if you'll search sorghum syrup online. Yeah.
A good website to go to is Bluegrass Foods. Matt Jamie's website. He buys a lot of Danny Townsend sorghum, and then I think he has plain sorghum, but he also flavors the sorghum in different ways, and you can get like a blueberry. It's all, but people could try that, bluegrassfoods.com. I think that he has quite a bit online there.
That's great. And another thing that I want to mention while we're on here, and I looked for my copy of this today and didn't find it, but Ronna Roberts of Lexington has a wonderful book about sorghum syrup. I think it's called Sweet Sweet Sorghum.
Yeah. Yeah, hold on.
Yeah. Anyway, there aren't a lot of books about it out there, but she writes about it, and she writes about the Kentucky producers. There we go. Rita, you're just great. Over this way, yes, Sorghum by Ronna Roberts, R-O-N-O Roberts, from Lexington. She and her husband used to host a cornbread supper once a week that people were just invited to, and I love that. I love that. It's something I always wanted to go to, and I didn't, and now we are confined to our homes.
We're gonna do it again, Ronnie. Don't you worry.
I know. And boy, are we ever gonna get together? Y'all, everybody on here, y'all just come to Holly Hill and we'll make biscuits and sorghum butter, which is really the most important thing that we need to know about sorghum, is that you pour it over some butter that's just malleable, not goopy, but not hard. And then you mix that up with the back of your fork, and then you make biscuits, and you just put that on biscuits and eat it. And there's nothing else really to say about sorghum syrup. So, oh yeah, Becky No Maldonado, that Mennonite grocery store in Hyndman, I love. And they have a brown sugar butter cookie. Do you remember that, Rita? Have you had that? And
yeah.
So they also, I think, have this incredible German bologna. So every time I come to Hyndman, that's my first stop. It's when you turn in, I go there and stock up on all the things that they have. I wonder if there are questions that we haven't answered for folks yet.
I was looking through the list. I don't have too many questions. Just a lot of cocktail recipes from Jonathan Piercy. Lemon plus good bourbon plus butter. Orange. Love that.
And when we have those dirty Victorian slang names, we can start calling the cocktails by that.
I want my own dirty Victorian slang name. Misty Rita.
That's upside down. I'm going to go back through all the great British baking shows and write down the names of things, and then we'll make one of those lists that, with your first letter and your last letter, and it'll be great.
Yeah. Well, I really I know we're getting winding down. I just want to say how much I miss Dumplins and Dancing, and how much I did think we did. This would be the fifth, the last four. How much fun we had together. I know you haven't been to everyone, but you've been to a lot. You've been to.
I missed the last one. I was at the first three, and then I missed the last one. I was a little intimidated. I don't know if you remember, but on number 3, we offended that poor man who was sleeping while we were singing songs and telling stories, and having a little nip down in the first floor. No, we weren't. I never did syrup is what I meant.
The cooking there has always been so fun. It's a place where you can cook. You don't have to worry about the restaurant aspect of it. So that's one thing.
No, not at all. And when Jason said, I did show up once. I think I told you it was squash, but it wasn't. It was cabbage. That we needed one more dish. And so I looked in the refrigerator, which is like, my go-to, and there was a big bag of cabbage, and I don't even remember what else went in it, but it was good.
Everybody loved it, and as I understand it, there was no food for that dish. Like, they needed a dish, not just another dish. There was nothing to eat.
No, I think there were a few other things. We had German bologna, I'm sure. Hey, Hampton Merida or Marita says sorghum dinner at Holly Hill sounds great.
Oh yeah, we should do that. A sorghum dinner. Ronnie, I'll do that if you come and sign copies of your book.
Absolutely. Honey, I'll come as soon as they put the gates down. I'm coming. So I will see you. Jason, shall we do the video?
Yeah. So the way the video will work is we'll actually premiere it on our Facebook page whenever we're done. So it looks like we got a couple other about being foamed with baking soda. If y'all know about that, that sounds intriguing to me.
I have not done that. I do know about it, and I'm not going to go through. If somebody wants to talk about the technique, Fred Sauceman told me about this. He has a wonderful film about sorghum syrup that focuses on the folks at Muddy Pond. I can't believe that I didn't mention Muddy Pond sorghum out of East Tennessee. They make beautiful sorghum there. And Fred told me, and a couple of other people, but what you do is you heat sorghum syrup up in the skillet, and then you add a baking soda to it, and it foams up. And this, have you done this, Rita?
I haven't, but I'm going to try it tomorrow.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like honeycombing sugar, hard cracked caramel. That's what it sounds like. You're making a honeycomb candy.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And the
I don't know the ratio off the top of my head, but it shouldn't be too hard to figure out. I'll try to post if I can research that.
Another thing that I look for and have never been able to really perfect the recipe is a thing, or to find a recipe to start from. It was called egg butter, but it didn't really have butter. It was eggs that were whipped and sort of in a custard. The sorghum and eggs made a custard. And I don't know anything else about that, but I ran across references to that in traditional cookbooks and books about traditional food. So there's always something out there to be discovered and explored and enjoyed. And Hyman Settlement School is the place to go find out about it. So thank you all for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for a wonderful, informative, and absolutely laughing, just a great time. It has been.
We didn't want to kind of grim people, we don't know how to have fun. You may want to watch this in the next day or two to brighten up again.
Probably will have to.
Depending on how to go for everybody.
Well, we certainly appreciate you all sharing your knowledge with us. And for those that are listening online, we'll have a recipe for the Woodford pudding and about a 20-minute how to use sorghum in your kitchen from Miss Weta. And we really appreciate them.
And clarifying thing too, right?
Yes. Yeah. So Jenny Williams, butter clarification using sorghum is coming up. It'll be on your news feed shortly. Yes. So thanks everybody for joining with us tonight. Tomorrow we have Kent Hubbard from the Wrigley Appalachian Eatery is going through the process of making a country ham, and that will not be a live session. That's a pre-taped one. We went a couple weeks ago and taped that, but that will premiere tomorrow at 7:00. So tune in, and as always, if you have any questions, please reach out to us. We'd love to try to help you out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Bye, folks. It's so great to see so many of you. Thanks for coming.
Bye, y'all.